Others think he was poisoned by a group of his officers, tired of his rages and his desire to be worshipped as a god. But for centuries, historians have debated the cause of death.
I'm sure of one thing: Alexander wasn't poisoned. The final fatal dinner party is dated May 29th. His death is the 10th, 11th of June. If you were going to poison Alexander, you'd have given him a massive dose. So what did kill him? Well, it can't be an epidemic. It's not that masses of other people died around him. It's not some kind of Asian flu. It must be something specific to him. I rally to malaria.
Alexander's body can't be examined because it's missing. On its way back to Macedonia, his funeral procession was ambushed by one of Alexander's generals who wanted to take the body to Egypt. For centuries, Alexander's body lay in the city of Alexandria.
It was probably one of the most sacred relics in the Roman Empire. Alexander became worshipped as a god after his death in a very serious way.
Julius Caesar came to pay homage to his dead hero. The Roman Emperor Augustus laid a golden crown on the coffin and scattered flowers over the corpse. But in the 4th century AD, something happened, and the tomb disappeared. Since then, Alexander's tomb is one of archaeology's holy grails. Some experts believe it could have been destroyed by war, or even earthquakes. But one British historian has a more startling theory. Andrew Chugg believes a clue to its whereabouts lies in a 16th century map.
In its exact center, there is a building, a small building, that could be the chapel, with the minaret of a mosque beside it, which is labeled Domus Alexandri Magni, which is Latin for the house of Alexander the Great.
It was here that a sarcophagus was located. It was meant for the Egyptian pharaoh Nectanebo II, but he was never entombed there. Is this where Alexander was laid to rest? The sarcophagus was rediscovered by Napoleon in the 19th century. But when he was defeated by the British, the empty sarcophagus was moved to London. Today it rests in the British Museum.
This thing may have been touched by the remains of Alexander the Great. When you think Julius Caesar may have been there, Augustus Caesar may have been there, Napoleon probably touched this thing, you get an almost electric thrill from it.
But the British Museum doesn't accept Chugg's idea. Any DNA evidence to support the claim is no longer there. And so the search continues to find the conqueror's body, buried somewhere under the shifting desert sands. Or perhaps, as some believe, beneath the city he named after himself, Alexandria. Although Alexander's body may be lost to history, his legacy still lives. His brilliant war tactics are studied at military colleges today.
There are ways or patterns of thought and action that become apparent in studying Alexander's generalship. And those patterns are as applicable in the modern day world as they were in Alexander's time.
A top commander is responsible for thousands of lives and must possess vision, discipline, and the unshakable confidence of his troops. Alexander the Great was a charismatic leader who could rally his men on their long campaign. His ability to connect with his soldiers earned him fierce loyalty on the battlefield. Whatever he demanded of his men, Alexander would do himself, leading the charge and sharing the dangers.
He was out there meeting with the lowest level of his troops. He knew many of them by their names. They had been on the campaign for so long. bonded people to him.
Over the centuries, military commanders have relied on Alexander's battle-proven strategies. The Roman emperors were inspired by the autocratic Alexander. They loved him because he achieved what others thought was impossible. When Julius Caesar reached the age of 32, he reportedly wept at the thought that his accomplishments were not as great as those of Alexander's.
It's clear, like so many other Romans, Julius Caesar had an Alexander complex. He suffered from Alexander envy. All Romans did.
One of the ancient world's greatest generals, Hannibal, was also influenced by Alexander. Both were driven by a hatred of an old enemy. Alexander wanted to punish the Persians, and Hannibal the Romans. And in revolutionary America, George Washington's military strategy owed a lot to Alexander.
Washington, in everything he did, you could actually trace the origins to Alexander the Great. The crossing of the Delaware is exactly a replica in terms of the strategies and tactics of Alexander the Great's battle at the Hydaspes.
In December 1776, General Washington led his ragged troops across the frozen Delaware River to attack the British. Their unexpected victory at Trenton became a turning point in the American War for Independence. As a schoolboy, the Corsican general Napoleon Bonaparte was fascinated by legends of Alexander the Great. Napoleon's ruthless ambition quickly propelled him through the army ranks. Like Alexander, he built his power on a series of daring military victories.
At the first opportunity, he followed in the footsteps of Alexander on his voyage to Egypt. He was most of all impressed by Alexander's religious policy, the way in which he adapted to whatever the circumstances were and adopted the point of view in whatever country he was present in.
In 1802, the French people voted him consul for life, and just 2 years later, Napoleon was crowned emperor. Like Alexander, Napoleon inspired total loyalty from his men. They both got to know their soldiers by name and rewarded them for their bravery on the battlefield.
When Napoleon was contemplating his invasion of Russia, he was thinking of Alexander because of the distances involved.
But unlike Alexander, Napoleon would face a painful defeat in battle and ultimate exile. Whatever his fate, Napoleon, like Alexander, was convinced he was a man of destiny. He believed that in warfare, men were nothing, but one man could win the day. George S. Patton, World War II general, was a commander cut from the same mold as Alexander.
From his very earliest days at West Point, George Patton admired the exploits of all the classical heroes, but in particular Alexander the Great. And there are several writings and notebooks that indicate that Patton did want to emulate the glories of Alexander past.
Like his idol, Patton studied his enemies for weaknesses. He could then work out the best way to beat them.
His hero was Alexander, and what he most admired him for was the discipline that he instilled in his troops.
Patton, like Alexander, seemed to be able to achieve what no other general could. In a bold move in 1944, a confident Patton switched the direction of his force, turning 100,000 men from the east to the north. Marching 100 miles in 3 days, they attacked the Germans. After 3 weeks of brutal fighting in what history calls the Battle of the Bulge, Patton's huge gamble paid off. Patton was welcomed home as a great general, but he still fell short of his hero, Alexander.
He is the gold standard for